Thinkers, what they do is they primarily focus on their thinking and on their logic to process information and solve problems. It's not that they can't feel, that they don't have feelings or don't listen to feelings. It's that they prefer to trust their logic and thinking in their lives. But what they tend to do is where there's a problem and there's feeling involved, they will either naturally or consciously put those feelings aside in order to make sound decisions. So when I talk about thinking problems, essentially what I'm talking about is when a thinker is actually using their logical structure and system to avoid what needs to be felt. And what I mean by that is, on one hand, a thinker will naturally want to move feeling aside, both within themselves and the feelings of others, to make decisions. But if they've got something that's unresolved within them, and often this can happen in childhood with some woundings from the family of origin, other life events that have caused a wounding within the self, and then they grow up with that unresolved, and then that logical structure or system is built on top of that wounding. And what that can do is that system is set up to actually protect them from re-feeling that feeling that they had when they were wounded, to not go there again. Now, I should put out there that this sort of topic can be very difficult for thinking preferred people, people that have a preference for the thinking, because they pride themselves so much on their ability to logically work through things, and to suggest that they might be using that to avoid dealing with a problem can be really difficult to take. And of course, not every thinker does that, but thinkers are not immune from emotional wounds. So when their structure is set up to protect them from dealing with that wound, even like almost in all cases, beyond the conscious awareness of the person, hence it's such a shock to even suggest that they might be not dealing with a problem. So an example of this would be, let's say the person lost a loved one, lost a parent or a sibling early on in life, and wasn't able to deal with it for whatever reason. So they weren't able to work through the grief. So they're going to have unresolved grief deeper down that then is influencing their logical processing to some extent. It'll be the logical processing becomes a defense mechanism to not feel the grief, or to not go there again. So a person that prefers thinking may use their logical system to justify avoiding grief, whether it's that past grief or grief that's coming up in the here and now, that will cause them to sort of lock down into their logical system in order to not feel the feeling in the present or the historical grief that hasn't been resolved. So in a sense, a healthy thinker will be dealing with life, noticing the emotions that are involved in a situation, and choosing to put them to one side, and then focusing on their logic to resolve problems and sort things out. Where it gets complicated is where there's a wounding that logical system is kind of covering, and then they use that structure to avoid emotions that actually need to be acknowledged, that need to be felt. And that essentially is the problem. What's ironic about this is there's a principle that whatever we're not consciously aware of ends up controlling us. So if we're not aware that we carry fear, then that fear will most likely be driving us in some way, or will be naturally doing things to reduce that fear or to avoid situations, and we might not even be aware we're doing any of that because we're not even aware that we're in fear. So it's ironic that for a thinker with unresolved emotional wounds could actually be driven by the emotions that they're not aware of or acknowledging, and their logical structure, their system of logic is actually designed to defend that position.